Hi folks, welcome back. Okay, I'm going to just speed through the rest of this article and get this over and done with. So this is going to be part 2. Sorry about part 1, it was a bit boring. It was half an hour long and I just wanted to set the stage. This is a huge subject. This one's going to be a bit more interesting for you. I'm going to get a lot of stuff in and I'm going to just speed through it. Okay, so here we go. More emotive language from the NGOs talking about this. There could be 2,000 gorillas and chimps. That doesn't count the number of animals processed for bushmeat. So more emotive and vague language could be this, could be that. He believes that wildlife law enforcement only catches about 10% of traffickers. So again, it's belief, right? It's known that ape meat continues to be a highly valued source of protein among wealthy city dwellers in Central and West Africa. So these wealthy city dwellers in their ivory tower, these yuppies, you see, they're trying to take away sympathy. In reality, he's already said somewhere else in this article that mothers make broth out of the bones, because you notice a lot of them are just skulls, there's no meat on them, to feed to their infants because they believe the broth, making out like it's some superstitious belief that the broth makes your child have strong bones, but it's the same reason why anybody feeds their children broth, because it actually does. It contains all the minerals, saying that it's protein and feeding people basically. Body parts also have a higher value per unit ratio, which means traffickers find that dealing in parts is not only less risky but also more profitable. Yeah, well, it's easier to hide a gorilla head down the back of your trousers when you're going through the airport than it is an entire gorilla up your jumper. That's what they're saying. This is the same kind of calculation. Oh, they're calculated, you see. Sustained and driven the global ivory trade. This global ivory trade. Another load of rubbish. But there you go. Driven by the money. Look at this guy. He's all about the money, this guy. Right? Squatting in the dirt. Selling his stuff out of a cardboard box. So they don't want these people to have any money, any food. Staggering profit to be made might fuel the carnage. It's not exactly carnage, is it? I worked it out as three gorillas per hunter every year. So just trying to get a reaction, trying to tug at the heartstrings language. The staggering profits are all made by these NGOs and these charities. One thing is clear, they're making a lot of money, otherwise they would not be there. If you look at the organization around this, you can tell that it's very lucrative. Ape parts used to be thrown away because they resemble human parts. Not anymore. This is a trade in its own right. It's done solely for the parts, rather than simply as a spin-off of the bushmeat trade. So the people are so hungry now that they're eating bits of the apes that they weren't eating before. That's what he's saying. Basically, the offal. Already the trade in skulls, hands and limbs is considered more damaging to ape populations than the closely associated bushmeat trade or the hunt for pets. It is leading poachers to kill more animals and bringing in new players. And yet no evidence is offered at all. Traffickers are well organized. Destructive professionalism will hugely and negatively impact these populations unless something is done. Eyes on the ground. Trade in great apes and their products is illegal in Cameroon and under the convention, this is what I mentioned before, CITES, Conventional and International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. CITES. After years of laxity regarding the trade, the central government stepped up law enforcement over the past decade. It signed memoranda of understanding with wildlife enforcement organizations like LAGA and expanded the number of security forces and prosecutors to conduct investigations and arrests. Today, the rate of arrest has stunned the country. Prosecutions have soared by 80%. Wildlife crime stories now find prominent space on radio, so they're using propaganda, and they've got the eyes on the ground. That's people spying on their neighbors, snitching on each other. This is their food source. Over the years, communities have come to play a more central role in this process, even though law enforcement has grown more sophisticated over time, involving undercover agents and informants. See, what did I say? Told you. Anti-poaching squads still rely on intelligence from local community members. They have the eyes on the ground to see what is going on before we ever do. Snitching on their neighbors. Still, he admits that wildlife conservationists and law enforcement have only begun to scratch the surface of the growing menace. This is a new phenomenon, and we are still doing investigations to fully understand it. They don't understand it. He admits it. If nothing is done, Africa will lose all of its great apes in 15 to 20 years. Now, let me tell you something. When I was a student, I organized an expedition, a conservation expedition to go to the jungle in South America. And I was telling everyone, because we were all told what to say. When I was raising the money, I said, if we don't do this expedition and stop the deforestation in the Amazon, then in 15 to 20 years there will be no Amazon left. That was 20 years ago, and the Amazon now apparently is bigger than it's ever been, and that's not because I organized my expedition. So this is the same rhetoric, the same bullshit, same baloney that these charities are using now as what I was using in my naivety back in the day. What I want to talk about today really is the chaos in the ape taxonomy world, the mystery surrounding great ape taxonomy. Everybody thinks that these scientists are so advanced that they know what's going on. I'm going to show you that there's total chaos and confusion. We have billy apes, we have Kulu Kambas, we have Yaoundé zoo ape, and we have Oliver the upright chimpanzee. Billy apes are supposedly a giant form of ape, also called the lion killer, because they're so big, they're like 6 foot tall, they can kill lions. Kulu Kambas are supposedly another kind of, maybe a hybrid between a gorilla and a chimpanzee, or just a different race in its own right. Also found in Central Africa. There is a skull in the Natural History Museum attributed to this species. It does look distinctive. It hasn't been accepted by the authorities on taxonomy. There's a picture of an ape in the Yaoundé Zoo. That's in Cameroon. And there's one photo going around, just one. You'd think it wouldn't be too much trouble to snap a few more, but there's just one photo, not a very great picture from a rather awkward angle, of this ape, which looks like neither a gorilla or a typical chimp. So it looks like there's another species there. And then there's this thing called Oliver the upright ape, which was found in a zoo. And he's a chimpanzee, some kind of chimpanzee, that walks around on 2 legs. And all sorts of explanations have been offered, whether it's a hybrid or whatever. In reality, what I'm saying is there's only supposed to be bonobo chimps, common chimps. That's 2 different species. And then of the gorillas, there's the western lowland, and then there's the highland gorilla. So 2 species of gorilla and 2 species of chimpanzees. That's all there's supposed to be. But there's all these, like I've said, all these mystery apes. There's another one, which is 6 foot tall, upright ape, that was reported by a Norwegian missionary, a lady living in the Billy area in Central Africa. And she said to Shelley Williams that these things are more than 6 foot tall, and they walk around on 2 legs. And other people have also mentioned these creatures. They're like a yeti, and this is the one that's hardest to find out any information about. But this lady claimed that she saw one. And then Shelley Williams, the scientist, ends up being shot in the back and paralyzed and put out of commission permanently. So the Kulu Kamba is a supposed hybrid between chimpanzees and gorillas. It's been reported in Africa since the mid-19th century. It says no empirical evidence has been found to substantiate the existence of the creature. Kulu Kamba was referenced by the French, and this guy Paul de Chailloux also described it. And there has been empirical evidence, actually. There's a skull in the Natural History Museum. It has a unique vocalization, and the skull looks a bit different from either a chimpanzee or a gorilla. This guy de Chailloux describes it as flatter-faced. It's larger than a chimpanzee, and it's got a slightly bigger brain, and it's more bipedal than a chimpanzee. It says it could be a mutation, but that really doesn't mean anything, because all genetic diversity, all the differences between all the species is supposedly in the orthodox model a result of mutation. So mutation just means nothing in this case. This guy, 1881 Koppenfeld, claims that it did indeed exist. I believe it is proved that there are crosses between the male troglodytes gorilla and the female troglodytes niger. Now, these names here, these are taxonomical names that have been changed since then. This is what I'm saying. There's chaos in primate, African ape taxonomy. Troglodytes now is a specific name of Pantroglodytes, the chimpanzee, and they're putting it down here as a generic name for the gorilla, which is now gorilla, and the female Troglodytes niger, which there's no Troglodytes niger now. Presumably that was chimpanzee. So he's saying that this is a hybrid. A couple of reasons they don't want you to know about hybrids between the great apes is because a gorilla and a chimpanzee are supposedly more evolutionarily remote from each other than a human is from a chimpanzee. So if a chimpanzee and a gorilla can mate, that would be more fantastic than a human being and a chimpanzee mating and producing offspring. And that they simply do not want you to know about, because the reality is that, I'm going to show it in this video, chimpanzees and human beings have a long history of mating and producing hybrid offspring together, and so have gorillas and chimpanzees, and so have gorillas and human beings. There's a whole spectrum of hybrids out there, and that's what I was trying to show in the last video by showing the comparisons between the broken hill skull and these mystery ape skulls in that article about poachers in Cameroon. Now they're talking about, in 1996, one picture of an unusual ape from the Yaoundé Zoo in Cameroon. I mean, they've got this ape in a zoo, and there's only one picture going around. What's going on? Was featured in the newsletter of the Internal Primate, blah, blah, blah. It's seemingly a hybrid ape with a wider face and larger skull than that of a chimpanzee and smaller than that of a gorilla. The ape in the picture had features that seem to belong to both the gorilla and the chimpanzee. It also has unique features which belong to neither group because it's got bright red eyes. I'll show you the picture in a minute. It's not been determined if the Kulakamba is a subspecies of chimpanzee hybrid or perhaps simply a product of individual variation. Yerkes, this is the famous primatologist, we'll go into him later, reported several unclassifiable apes with features intermediate between chimpanzee and gorilla in his 1929 book, A Study of Anthropoid Life. This guy, Yerkes, he was actually producing human-animal hybrid apes in America. It's believed there are regional races of chimpanzee classified as separate species by over-enthusiastic scientists. Over-enthusiastic. What I'm saying is there is a whole spectrum of hybrids and species, good, genuine species, that are not recognized either. So here's a regular chimpanzee skull. It's very different from the pictures I showed you in that article. Notice the nose is, the hole for the nose there is between the two orbits for the eyes, much higher than the ones in those pictures I showed you. This is a gorilla skull, completely different shape to a chimpanzee. It can't be mistaken for a chimpanzee unless you saw a juvenile, which are rather similar, or a female, which doesn't have these big muscle attachments here around the back and on the top. The Yaoundé Zoo mystery ape and the status of the Kulakamba. Here we go. So this is a very good article. You should check this out. Might put the link in. He doesn't include the photo of the ape by Jenkins, which you would think these links are all gone. There's supposedly really good links here. I tried to find these photos. For some reason, these links are no good, so they're not showing up. Don't imagine that that's by accident, because this is a very difficult subject to research. This is a Kulakamba from Gabon. It does look intermediate between a chimp and a gorilla. This one here is a stuffed example in a museum, so it may not be 100% accurate. But look, it's got a nose which chimps and gorillas never have. They never have any kind of nose. And on this one, it's got a sort of flat. It's not a flat nose, it's a bit of a nose, and they don't have that at all. So this thing is neither a gorilla nor a chimp. So what this is, I don't know. It's another mystery ape. This is the Kulakamba. I think this is the one in the Natural History Museum in London. If you compare this to the chimp and gorilla skulls, completely different. The jaw is a different shape here. It's a more square jaw. It's a flatter muzzle. Chimp has a proper muzzle like a dog, and the brain case, the brain size is larger. So this is a absolutely totally different thing from either a gorilla or a chimp. This is the picture by Jenkins of the animal in the Yaoundé Zoo. I managed to find it, and as you can see, we don't get a very good angle on this thing because the muzzle is what you really want to see. So you want a profile picture, or at least a 3/4. It's facing you head on, so you can't see the profile of the muzzle. However, it's got bright orange eyes, which neither gorillas nor chimps have, so it's got a unique feature. It's hard to say whether that's a gorilla or a chimp. It's unusual. And it's got that square jaw, which we saw on the Kulakamba square jaw. So this could be the same ape as that. And if this is in a zoo, why is nobody studying it? What's the point of a zoo if you're only going to get one photo? What are the taxonomists doing? What are the scientists doing? What are these conservation groups doing if they're not trying to identify and classify this animal? Strange. Anyway, I'll put all these articles in the description. You can check it out for yourself. But there, to satisfy anyone's curiosity, is the Yaoundé ape. Mystery of the Kulakamba. More pictures of the Kulakamba. This one compared to a typical common chimpanzee on the right. So there's Kulakamba on the left. You see the brain is bigger. It's got a square jaw. The muzzle is slightly shorter. And it's the profile, really, where the distinction is made and becomes apparent, not head on like that. So this photo not very helpful, actually. That apparently is Kulakamba, possibly. I covered some of this in my video, Shelley Williams, Silenced Scientist, Discoverer of the Billy Ape, and you should go and check that out because I don't want to just go over all that. However, this Shelley Williams, she was trying to find out this Billy Ape. She went out there and did an expedition, ended up getting shot in America and unable to complete her work. But the thumbnail that you saw there shows an upright ape. This looks like the Kulakamba skull. This is the rather ropey photo that we got. This is all we got from that expedition. It's really sad. But definitely not a typical chimp. That's the Kulakamba. And we get this one photo from this guy, Carl Oman, who's a photographer who went down there specifically to document Billy Ape and the Kulakamba. And so this guy's life work is he's produced only one photo, which didn't come from him, came from Shelley Williams. And this is it. I mean, how could he not have taken more photos? Very strange. And this skull, if you look at its big square jaw, it looks like Australopithecus afarensis or robustus, actually. So that might be part of the reason for the cover-up. In this video, we see these what are called Billy apes in captivity in a zoo in America, and they are giant chimpanzees. But they just look like large common chimpanzees, actually. They don't look like the Kulakamba at all. So anyway, check that video out if you're interested in all that. But in this video, we get into the description of the Kulakamba as being an upright walking gorilla or chimp, over 6 foot tall, which is quite different from the Kulakamba and the Billy ape, which are quadrupeds with slightly different shaped bodies, but not an upright. So what I'm saying is there's something out here that looks like an intermediate between a human being and an ape. So the Billy ape, they're saying here, or the Bondo mystery apes were given their name in 2003 in sensational reports in the popular media, right? So this article here immediately is trying to diminish your confidence in these reports by saying it's popular and sensational. To a purportedly new species of highly aggressive giant ape supposedly inhabiting the wetlands and savanna around the city of Billy. The apes nest on the ground like gorillas, but they have diet and characteristics of chimpanzees. In other words, they're meat eaters. And it says it soon turned out they were common chimpanzees. Nothing to see here. Again, Karl Amann is mentioned, a Swiss photographer. Who knows if he was involved in the cover-up, but he's always mentioned. His work is impossible to find. Shelley Williams, who claims, you see, they're saying that she just made some claims, and says, oh, you know what they say? They say it's not enough to kill someone, you must destroy their reputation as well. Williams returned to the US with videos apparently purchased from one of Amann's long-term trackers. Williams reported on her close encounter. We could hear them in the trees about 10 meters away, and 4 suddenly came rushing through the bush towards us. There are tree beaters which often disperse high into the trees to stay safe and easily succumb to poison arrows by the local hunters. Then there are lion killers, bigger and darker, unaffected by poison arrows. So that's 2 different species. She claims to have observed 3 species of chimpanzees, including this new one, during her summer tour. Amann had published a letter in 2003 decrying Williams' unprofessional involvement. Sensational pronouncements. So this is all to cover it up. Williams and Amann fell out. She vowed to continue without him, making plans for another expedition. Clive Hicks was recruited by Amann. So who's financing this guy, Amann, this Swiss? And he's from Kenya as well. He's a Swiss Kenyan. So he'll be involved with the Leakey Foundation, which is MI6. And it was a very, very interesting article. You want to read that? And then we have this curious oddity. Oliver, the walking upright chimpanzee, this creature which was found in a zoo or performing in a circus in America. They said it could be a human chimpanzee hybrid because it wanted to walk around on its back legs all the time, and it didn't look like a typical chimpanzee. Janet Berger stated that Oliver started to become attracted to her when he reached the age of 16. And they said that that's because it's a human-animal hybrid, and the human part of it was attracted to human women. So they decided to sell him to Michael Miller, a New York attorney. This is another important point I want to make later on in the video, is that male apes are attracted to human women, and they do frequently rape them or have consensual sex with them, as we'll discover later on. Anyway, this creature, they couldn't ever satisfactorily attribute it to one or the other species. It looks like it's just another mystery ape from Africa. So whether he was a hybrid or not, or just a undocumented species, he was attracted to human women. That's the point. Now we're going to look at Eugene McCarthy's website, which you all need to have a go and have a look at, macroevolution.net. This is absolutely amazing website. I've spoken to this guy. He's the real deal. Amazing scientist. One of the top guys on the planet today. Ape-human hybrids. So everybody seems to think that hybrids are impossible between different species, or if they do occur, they are completely sterile or they're completely unviable and they just die soon after they're born. Well, this is not true. And it is true that male apes, gorillas and chimpanzees, and other monkeys as well, will attack and rape female human beings. All the great apes, even orangutans, are capable of this, and it is known in Africa that this occurs, and human-animal hybrids can result from these matings, and sometimes they are not too fucked up. Sometimes they're functional, they can live, and they can go off and live with the apes, or sometimes they can live with the human beings, depending which side they take after. Interestingly, in this particular picture here, so this is obviously a gorilla. It looks like your classic gorilla carrying off a human woman. In this picture, this looks like a Bigfoot. It's much taller than the human being, and it seems to have proper long legs like a human would have, or like a Bigfoot would have. So this suggests that there are hybrids living in the jungle that are also raping and sort of back-crossing with human women. And as you can see, look, they're calling it an orangutan carrying off a Negro woman. Presumably this is in Africa and they're calling it an orangutan. And this is what I'm saying, that the taxonomy of apes is far more complex than we've been led to believe. They use different names for chimpanzees. Let's have a look. We'll go on a little bit further. This guy's calling them pongos, and the generic name for gorillas was gorilla. Then it was they called it troglodytes. It's changed so many times, and this I think is because you've got a whole spectrum of human, animal, ape hybrids. If these creatures are so promiscuous that they will try to mate with human beings which are very distantly related, very different from themselves, then the result will be a whole spectrum of hybrids living out there in the jungle. That's why we're showing you those skulls that the NGOs had confiscated in Cameroon, and I was showing the variation, and some of them look just like what the people at the Natural History Museum are calling Rhodesian man, or the Broken Hill skull, supposedly a human ancestor. It's clearly a modern hybrid, but they're trying to fit it into the orthodox scheme, and the orthodox scheme doesn't admit human-animal hybrids, so they just say, oh, it's a primitive man. So the stories here about in Nigeria, women being raped by chimpanzees. And then if you want to see what one of these hybrids looks like, this is Augusto Dembo. This little boy was born in Uganda, I believe, and Angola. And Dr. Antonio Mendes of the hospital in the city of Luena near Angola is quoted as saying sexual relationships between humans and chimpanzees are fairly common in the region, but this is the first time a pregnancy is officially reported. There's one. There he is. Look, he's got the long top lip, the sticky out ears of a chimp, and look at his arms. Look, he's putting his knuckles down there to support himself in the chimp-like position. But the thing with hybrids is they can take after the mother, or they can take after the father, or they can have equal characteristics from either side. So this one will be able to live amongst human beings. He'll just be a slightly funny looking boy. If he'd turned out covered in hair, he might have had to go off and live with his father in the woods. And Oliver the Humanzee is discussed here as well. So now this guy, Adso the Ape Man, is very, very interesting. His movements, there is video footage, I'll try and find it on YouTube. He's got a small brain, and his movements are very, very chimpanzee-like. He was found living in Morocco in the Atlas Mountains among human beings in a village. I don't think he was a skinny microcephalic. He was the same size as a chimpanzee, a very short guy. When you see him amongst other human beings, the guy standing next to you is probably very short too. But this guy was definitely an ape hybrid in my. He has a long muzzle, too many traits that were ape-like to be. I mean, he's got long arms. Too many ape-like traits to say he was just simply a microcephalic. But who's to say that microcephalics haven't inherited the small brain from an ape anyway? I think a lot of these syndromes and things are actually throwbacks to an ape ancestor. And Gordon Gallup, psychologist at the University of Albany in New York, said that a human-ape hybrid was produced in a Florida laboratory in the 1920s. And I actually have a book written about that, and with pictures of one of the human hybrids in it. I'll see if I can find that. I've ordered it from Amazon. I did have it before, but it was stolen. And they produced a human being who was walking around, who was half human, half chimpanzee. I got the pictures. This guy, Ivanov, Russian biologist who invented the procedure of artificial insemination. So he was a top scientist. He was sent down to the Congo to set up a laboratory there to produce human-animal hybrids, human-ape hybrids. And they reckon that it was a failure and didn't work. But Stalin sent him all the way down to the Congo and set up a lab. And this guy was the top guy. I don't think it failed at all. I think it was successful, just like they were doing in America around about the same time. So in the 20s, the Russians and the Americans were both creating human-animal hybrids, and they were fully viable and they were walking around, they were alive. And there's countless examples of ape-human hybrids. So it's not rare at all. So when people talk about Bigfoot, Yetis and stuff, and the American Indians talk about them raping human women, this is what the cover-up is all about. Okay, I found the pictures on this YouTube channel here of this human chimpanzee hybrid that was produced in America. I think it was the Yerkes Primate Center in the 1920s. So the same time that Ivanov, the Russian, was doing his stuff in the Congo, the Americans were doing it in Florida. And this boy was the result. He looks rather hunched. He doesn't look very good on his feet. But he's got sticky out ears and the prognathic jaws of his ape parent and the kind of hunched posture. But he's got a large domed head like a human being. So his nose is halfway between a human and an ape. He's rather short, like a chimpanzee. There's a human woman next to him and a human man. And you see he's chimpanzee-sized, so he's inherited the stature of his ape ancestor, his ape parent. And his teeth, he doesn't have the fangs of a chimpanzee. Got human-shaped teeth, but just enlarged. So there you go. This guy isn't called Adso at all. I thought the name was wrong. This is Basu. Check out this video of Basu. Notice the way he moves. He doesn't really speak. He uses grunts and a few gestures. Doesn't like wearing clothes. And if you look at the pictures, he looks big and strong, but actually, when you're standing next to other human beings, you see how small he is. He's just the size of a chimpanzee. He's got very long limbs, though, and a long, pronounced muzzle. He's a bit older in this picture here. This is when he was young. Very long limbs, you see. That's how it can go with these hybrids. They can have the long arms of a chimp and also the long arms of a human. Sorry, say that again. The long arms of a chimp and the long legs of a human. Could also turn out that they get the short arms of a human and the short legs of a chimp. It all depends on the shuffling of the cards. Basu, let me find the videos of him moving around, because there is a guy who's got a dedicated channel to this guy, Basu. Okay, here's another one. See, look, chimpanzee's got the high cheekbones of the chimpanzee, sticky out ears, and the low top of the head is very low, small-brained, long arms, strange posture. Look at the profile there. Very prognathic jaws. When you look for these things, you find they're really common. Just as the old writers were telling us, they were saying it's very common for humans and apes to crossbreed. Look at his face. If we dug up his skull, presented it to the Natural History Museum, they'd say this is 330,000 years old. And they'd say it's some human ancestor. They'd say Homo erectus. The long muzzle. Sticking out ears of a chimp. And there's lots of videos like that. Especially in Africa, where the apes are found and they rape human women, basically. And it's very, very embarrassing for the ladies. They would rather not tell people that they were raped and defiled in this way. So they just cover it up. They say, oh, well, he was just deformed. He had a syndrome. You know, it's nobody's fault. Well, that's how they occur. That's what happens. As you can see, these macaques, Barbary apes, do live in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco. And as we saw on Eugene McCarthy's website, macaques have been known to rape women. They gang rape women. I've been not raped by macaques, but I have been around macaques, and they're very, very aggressive. They'll come right up to you, steal things out of your hand, and they are vicious and aggressive. They're not scared of humans. So this is a good website to check out. There's a very interesting article on Basu the Ape Man. Couldn't find the really good video footage of him. If anybody knows where that is, it's really important to look at the way he moves, because it's very, very monkey-like. Anyway, this is what they say here. Sexual intercourse with animals is widely practiced in Morocco, where bestiality is a socially approved behavior. Fathers encourage sons to practice anal and vaginal intercourse with donkeys in order to make the penis grow. Boyhood masturbation is scorned in favor of bestiality, and the sight of a group of young Moroccan boys taking turns mounting a donkey is accepted as merely comical. Grown-up men are not punished as long as they perform the act with their own livestock. Sexual intercourse with apes and other animals is also widely practiced and accepted behavior throughout Africa in general. Sexual acts between humans and animals were not punished or even considered socially unacceptable among the Kusai and Maasai tribes. On the South Sea island of Kusai, men are reported to use cattle occasionally as sexual objects, and Maasai male adolescents frequently use female donkeys as a sexual outlet, and in practice as they believe it improves their lovemaking. The Swahili, a Bantu people of Zanzibar and Tanzania, and fishermen along the coast of Africa near Mombasa, believe that unless they had anal sex with the sea cows they netted, they would be dragged out to sea the next day and drowned by the dead sea cow's sister. At El Yemen, trained baboons were popular sex partners for both men and women, and the women in Abyssinia and the Sudan smuggled dog-faced apes into the harem and had sexual relations with them. Among the Mangabe of Madagascar, bestiality with calves and cows has been observed to be practiced openly by children and adults alike. The people of the Hottentot tribe, nomadic people in southwest Africa, do not consider bestiality to be immoral. They do, however, regard incest in a negative light. Sex with animals used to be a part of the Igbo, a Nigerian tribe, coming-of-age ritual. Every boy had to successfully copulate with a specially selected sheep, to the satisfaction of a circle of elders who witnessed the performance. Among the Yoruba, another tribe in Nigeria, there was the custom that a young hunter had to copulate with the first antelope he ever killed while it was still warm. Many tribes in Central Africa believe animals to be the ancestors of human beings. In voodoo ceremonies, as well as in some other religious and magical rituals, individuals believe themselves as transformed into animals and have sexual relationships with other humans or with animals in the kind they believe themselves to be. A large number of persons are happy to copulate with chimpanzees, gorillas, and other apes. So, we see here where the theory of evolution comes from. It's voodoo. It's not a modern, up-to-date theory at all. The BBC and your schools and the Natural History Museum, they'll make you think it's the latest cutting-edge scientific theories and knowledge that humans evolved from animals. It just comes from voodoo, the Illuminati religion, voodoo, paganism. So pan-troglodytes is supposedly known to inhabit caves, and especially where it lives in very hot, dry climates, because they don't always, the chimpanzee doesn't always live in the jungle. There are parts of its range where it lives in savanna, and those chimpanzees will use caves to shelter in because it's cool in the cave. Now, if you remember, a few weeks ago I did a video about the rights of Pan in Israel at the foot of Mount Hermon on the border between Israel and Syria. And there's a cave there in Mount Hermon where Banias, the temple to Pan, is situated. And according to the rights of Pan, I explained what they used to do was the troglodytes, or the people of Pan, these creatures, which I'm saying are Pan troglodytes, either a human chimpanzee hybrid, therefore a Yeti, or a Bigfoot, however you want to look at it, or just a straight chimpanzee. They were living in the caves because Israel is very hot and arid, and a chimpanzee in that environment will use caves to shelter, to be cool, and there's water in there. There's a good water source for them as well. And the rights of Pan involved human-animal sex, and presumably sex with these chimpanzees. And they would call the offspring the sons of God, and that's why pagan religion always has human-animal hybrids depicted as nature gods. So if you want to see the results of that, then I'm going to show you the results of those human-animal mating events, and they did have offspring, and the skulls are being discovered to this day in Israel. And these are the direct result of couplings between humans and apes. And this article explains it. Well, it doesn't explain it, it's trying to explain it away. Give it a more acceptable, socially acceptable, explanation, placing it 400, about 30, on average about 33,000 years ago. Again, these are the hybrids they're discovering. Human ape hybrids. Dragon man in China. According to the voodoo belief, that's how they're being presented, as human ancestors. But they're not, they are human-animal hybrids. New species discovered in Israel with half human, half chimp traits, because these are the offsprings from the rights of Pan. Human ape hybrids, that's all they are. And that's what the broken hill skull is. That's why they depict them like this. That's Augusto Dembo. That's what he'll look like when he's grown up. Or his sister. They're not human ancestors at all. Well, they may be some people's ancestors, but that's not where all humans came from. This is a hybrid between a human and an ape, and the scientists are, in their naivety or their dishonesty, they're trying to misinterpret it deliberately to throw people off the scent. And that's a Yeti, cross between a human and an ape hybrid. They call it a Neanderthal. They found them in Italy because they were big pagans in Italy in the Roman times. They found them all over the Middle East, in Israel, in Iraq. This would be one of those caves that the chimpanzees were inhabiting to stay cool in the Middle Eastern sun. And there we go, famous one, Shanidar. That's a human-ape hybrid. Exactly like the cave at Banias, where the Temple of Banias is situated. The chimps would have been living there. Humans would have mated with them, produced these hybrid offspring. Same thing happening today. Now this is gonna blow your mind. This is where religion comes from. I've already explained in previous videos that the pagan god is Pan, and that's Pan Troglodytes because he is the patriarch, the father of their race, the Illuminati race. He's the progenitor of the race. Chimps have temples. They've discovered temples in the jungle and rituals. They conduct rituals in the temple. That's where religion comes from. And the Illuminati, they love rituals. Religions come from chimps. That's why you have all these secret, bloody rituals as well, involving human sacrifice and cannibalism. Chimp temples tell us about the evolution of religion. Cleaning corpses, they build temples. Yeah, and it's the savanna chimps. Those are the ones that use caves because it's very hot, there's not much shelter. They have to go into the caves for water and to keep cool. All religions come from chimpanzees. And stonings, that's why the Bible is full of stonings, because chimpanzees, they throw rocks and they do stonings. They're called rock apes, these yetis. That's where it comes from. They have sacred trees, sacred groves. They do tree knocks. Okay, so let's just give a brief summary of my conclusions. Number one, the morphological diversity that we saw in those ape skulls from Cameroon is due to the fact that humans and apes in that part of the world have been hybridizing. It's a hybrid zone, and this has been going on a long, long time. And this explains why some of the skulls look like a bit more like the Broken Hill skull, the archaic hominid skull. That's because it is just a modern human-ape hybrid that they've tried to explain away, and they've pretended that it's some missing link in the course of human evolution. Number two, hybridization between apes and humans is the cause of the problems in ape and human taxonomy. Number three, cavemen, so-called, or archaic hominids, or any of the hominids are human-ape hybrids, and they've just been given a politically correct but misleading and totally wrong explanation by the so-called experts. Number four, chimps inhabit caves in arid climates such as Israel and Iraq, where all these cavemen, such as Neanderthals and this newly discovered human species that was discovered this year, where they've been found. And back in the day, such as Banias Cave in Israel, they were having sex with the human beings, were having ritualized sex with Pan, the god Pan, which we now know as Pan Troglodytes, the common chimpanzee, and producing these hybrids. Number five, religious rituals have their origins in chimp behavior. And the number six, human primate sexual intercourse is widespread and well documented. So we don't have to speculate it about if it could occur, if it does occur. It's well known, there's plenty of documentation. Number seven, living human primate hybrids exist, and you can see videos of them walking around in the modern day, and they are disguised as birth defects and microcephaly and these weird rare conditions. They are actually human primate hybrids. Number eight, Illuminati. They are ape-human hybrids produced during the pagan era, and the pagan religion that they followed then is the same as what they follow now. Number nine, evolution is a voodoo pagan concept of the Illuminati. The idea that the idea that animal souls can reincarnate as human beings. and that they become more upright through successive generations. This is their whole scheme. Number 10, Illuminati blood rituals are explained as inherited chimp behavior. Chimps are known to eat infants. They love eating their own infants, each other's infants. If a female chimp gives birth, she has to go and hide with the infant in the wood from the other chimps because they will catch and eat her. It's their favorite food. They will eat her infant. And chimps will break into human houses and snatch infants out of cradles, human infants, and eat them as well. So what we think of as weird satanic rituals involving the consumption of other human beings, blood rituals, is actually just it's a chimp behavior that they've inherited. So there you go, folks. Now next video, as promised, I'm going to talk about the Leaky Foundation and how these corrupt Illuminati have been misinterpreting and misrepresenting the evidence of everything I've shown you today. And it's all run by the Illuminati. They're NGOs like the Leaky Foundation and these charities and these trusts and foundations. Anyway, look, I'm going to put some of these links in the description. You can go and check it all out for yourself. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.